Then it is 4:17, and I'll call our meeting to order. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Watson, Harrison. All in favor? Any discussion, I guess?
Oh, no.
All in favor. Motion to approve the previous minutes. Watson, Harrison. Any discussion of the previous minutes? All in favor? And then no new business, so it looks like we're moving to unfinished business. We have a legislative update, and I will turn things over to Deputy City Administrator.
Thank you. It has been a busy time in Lansing, as Andrea can attest. As budget negotiations continue and as legislators are up in Lansing, there have been a lot of hearings and a lot of legislative packages move forward. Just in the last week, our local speed limits bill had a hearing, had first reading, which went well. We anticipate that that will work its way out of committee. Special thanks to Andrea as well for helping to get that hearing scheduled and moving forward. Do you have anything to add on that, Andrea?
I was just going to say that did report out of committee this week, and so we're pushing at this point to see if we can get that taken up on the floor before summer recess while they're negotiating the final budget.
Great. There was obviously a lot of activity around the election related bills from Senator Moss and Representative Sterniglau. Jackie Boudry, who yesterday was installed as president of the Michigan Association of Municipal Clerks, has been actively involved in that legislation. She was testifying up in Lansing this week, and that's an important set of bills that are featured in our legislative priorities document. So we were happy about that. Also this week, the Death Star legislation, repeal legislation, had a hearing. Two bills in particular, one of them would repeal the legislation that outlawed project labor agreements, had a hearing, and also another piece of legislation that banned local governments from setting labor standards, that also had a hearing. And so we're optimistic about both of those bills. We were up there putting cards of support for both of those, and we've been working behind the scenes to help make sure those hearings were scheduled and that we're moving forward. So that's just in the last week. I feel like there were other bills that were on. Source of income. Yeah, source of income legislation, banning housing discrimination on source of income also had hearings. We've been involved with that, playing a support role for the coalition that's supporting that legislation. I'm on the Washington Housing Alliance board, so they've also been really front and center on that, and we've been trying to provide support wherever we can. That legislation is also on our legislative policy agenda, so we're happy to see that moving forward. So everything's coming up in Ann Arbor in Lansing this week. It's been really great for us. We're also getting a lot more optimistic about our sustainability related bills. As recently as just a few months ago, I think the general feeling was there might not be a lot of room left on the agenda for the sustainability package, but I think the conventional wisdom for that is shifting a lot. And we're starting, we are, and a lot of other organizations, lobbying for community solar, for increase in the distributed generation cap. In particular, are starting to get a lot more optimistic about those bills moving forward, potentially this fall. So there's a lot of energy coming together around those things. Of course, Senator Irwin is front and center on that legislation, and we've been having a lot of conversations with him and his staff, and we're starting to get a lot more optimistic about those things. Just going through our list. I'm hearing that polluter pays has been bumped to the fall, but it's still on the list of priority legislation for for Democratic leadership. Senator Schenck and Representative Braybeck have bills introduced to eliminate the preemption on regulating plastic containers and bags. Those are awaiting a hearing, but they have a lot of co-sponsors, and I think there's a lot of support in the caucus to move those things forward. Of course, you know, people paying attention to what was discussed up at the Mackinac Policy Conference, the split rate property taxation or the land value tax proposal. That's in our legislative policy agenda. It's that concept has been formally endorsed by Mayor Duggan in Detroit, and Democratic leadership is supportive of it. So we anticipate movement on that. I talked about the election bills and the Death Star laws. So our legislative agenda is looking really good right now.
We also had on two local ordinance that we have, the Clown Act was signed into law today at the state level. And House voted yesterday to advance conversion therapy ban, I believe.
So it's exciting.
Yeah, it's been a good week.
It's been a good week.
I did want to flag too, if I could, just, I know, John, you mentioned a couple things that, you know, will be worked on over the summer, and there's a lot. The legislature's been very busy and active, and there are a lot of major policy agenda items that they're looking to move on next, and really many of those have been introduced, and so they'll be kind of doing all the work over the summer months during the recess in July and August to have those prepped and ready to go quickly in September. So you mentioned like the climate package that has, you know, provisions in our renewables and DG, the polluter pay. There are a couple others I just wanted to flag. There's a kind of a round two, it's like a House climate package too that was introduced. And I do want to flag, there are a number of things in there, but one of them is provisions in really incentivizing and calling out the electrification of a number of things, including appliances. And so I'll share those. They just got dropped, but there are three bills, 4759 through 4761, but the one in particular deals with heating, cooling, and other both residential, kind of commercial building systems that electrification, including appliances. So I know that's something the city has talked about. And then the other thing I wanted to add that, and I don't know how much the city may want to engage, but there's a lot of work happening and will continue over the summer on water affordability. Senator Chang is kind of leading that effort and working with you know, a lot of stakeholders, including, you know, local governments, especially water system operators on that. And so folks may have been looped in through the association with the city, but just wanted to make sure council members were aware there's a lot of work being done in hopes of having a package on that ready to go in the fall as well. So just a couple of things to highlight that have been, you know, areas of expressed interest.
I believe this is a question for Andrea. I had heard something about, I believe on the House side in the budget, support for food banks somewhere on the order of like 100 million or even more. Andrea, do you know anything about that, or if that's likely to stay in or fall out? I don't know.
Well, we'll be finding out soon.
Okay.
House and Senate committee chairs have all been kind of told by 5 p.m. today they have to have, in working with the administration, have to reach a budget agreement based on the new targets they received earlier this week. So those are, you know, that won't all necessarily be released, all those details. Those budgets, once those agreements are reached amongst the Democratic Party's leadership, will work across the aisle. You know, there are Republican votes that are needed for immediate effect, so they'll begin that negotiation process across the aisle with Republicans to finalize the budget. Potentially as early as next Thursday, likely, you know, then, and you know, that soon or the week following. So just depending how those final negotiations go. But I think the food bank issue is one that's been a real priority just because of, you know, the crisis and the huge demand that our food banks are facing just with inflation and other challenges families face.
Thanks. Yeah, no, that's similar priority over here. And well, thanks for the thorough kind of timeline there. One other question on the, I heard recently that the MISHDA Missing Middle Housing Grant Program has like kicked off pretty recently. I don't know, are there any details on that one, or where should we kind of direct people to, I guess, if we,
Yeah, there's, you know, been a few rounds of funding on the housing and some of the, you know, the missing middle. There's more that they are looking at for the budget, and it sounds really promising. I think that's an area there's just been broad bipartisan support. You know, the housing crisis, and it really is a crisis, is touching every community in the state. So it's something there are, you know, there's a lot of you know, broad coordinated effort supporting more investments in housing and on that missing middle. Yeah, so I think we'll see more in the budget. You know, again, what all that looks like, but that's not, you know, that seems to be something there's broad consensus on.
Good to hear. Thanks.
Any other questions on this topic? Can we open the petition?
I don't think we can.
Okay, all right. Then without that, then we'll move on to unfinished business number 2, funding request and project update.
So I'll start at the federal level since that's the easier one. I think I've reported in the past that Senator Peters is supporting all 4 of our federal earmark requests, which is very important since he's on the Senate Appropriations Committee. But, you know, as you may have noticed, there is virtually no work happening in Washington, D.C. right now on the federal budget. So we won't know where we are with those requests until there's a budget deal hammered out between the House and the Senate. Anecdotally, on the House side, you know, some members of Republican leadership are saying things like people shouldn't expect to have any of their earmarks fully funded. There's going to be a lot of partial funding going on. I don't know if that is an opinion that's reflected by Speaker McCarthy or by his budget negotiators. And of course, what Senate Democrats in the White House think about that also matters quite a bit. So it's kind of a crapshoot. We'll have to see where we are at. With the on the state level, with you know, the House and the Senate agreeing on budget targets and work on the budget moving forward, I'm hoping to have some answers on our earmarks relatively soon. And Andrea is the one with the most up-to-date information on the state level. So do you have anything to add, Andrea?
I don't right now, and I know a lot of the details on those individual requests, you know, that members, I don't even believe, have received confirmation on that. You know, we're just not to that point. It's again, you know, they're just trying to finalize budgets today on the departmental budgets, the enhancement grants that we refer to them as on the state level. Those will follow, but we don't have those have not been released yet. So members really don't know where the requests are, where they stand just yet. But that should be finalized in the next week. I mean, it should be very soon that we start hearing on those projects.
We're crossing all of our fingers and toes, light some incense, do whatever you got to do, because we're really in kind of the crapshoot, luck of the draw territory at this point. We have done a monumental amount of work to try and lobby for project funding in Lansing, and I feel very good about the work that we've done and the position we put the city in. We just have to wait and see what we're going to get.
Okay.
So
I can provide an update on the federal earmarks.
thank you, Mary Beth.
For promoting me. I'm now a panelist. I was blindly listening. They're just getting started with the markup. This week, there were a couple at the subcommittee level, and usually and this is in the House, won't see lists until they do it at full committee. There was some back and forth today between Democrats and Republicans about how they would allocate total funding for earmarks and whether it should be based on proportions of the majority in the House versus each getting a proportion of total earmarks submitted by either side. So I know that's kind of unclear, but they're basically fighting over what portion should go to Republicans and what portion should go to Democrats. So just not voting well, I think. There's more discord, not that that's a surprise. But at the end of the day, both Republicans and Democrats, and a lot of Republicans did submit earmark requests. So I think that's a good sign for moving forward. And that they're actually having this fight, I think, means that there will be earmarks. It's not the Republicans saying we're not doing earmarks. They're saying we want to take the majority of them since we are in the majority, and back and forth over that. So we will keep an eye out as the bills, and we'll let you know. None of the ones where the city had requested projects have come before full committee yet, but those will be rolling on over June and July. So we'll let you know as soon as we see something.
Thank you.
And the Senate is starting its process too, so that's good. Sometimes we'll get through the summer and the Senate won't have marked up a bill. So, with the debt ceiling resolution, there was it pushed them. There has to be passage of all bills in order to avoid defense and non-defense spending cuts. So that motivates both sides.
Jim, Andy, and Mary Beth and I were hunting through the House and Senate office buildings in DC not too long ago, banging down doors, talking about our projects. So a lot of our focus recently has been on Andrea and the Lansing team and Aaron and the whole 9 yards. It is, I think, maybe a benefit that the state budget process and the federal budget process really aren't going on at the same time. Soon we will be turning our attention to DC and taking advantage of the talents of our DC team. So thank you, Mary Beth, and everybody in DC who's working on our behalf.
Okay. Any questions? It sounds like we still have some things to find out, but I wondered in particular with landfill solar, if we're hearing any rumblings of positive things, since we're not the only ones advocating for that, or if that's just as kind of up in the air as everything else.
We are hearing rumblings of positive things.
Okay.
That's about the best that I can tell you. I feel we have done everything possible, and I feel like we're in as good a position as we can be in.
Okay.
Do you have any other feedback on that, Andrea?
I was just going to say, I've been talking with, most recently with the House Appropriations Chair. I know she's confirmed she has been hearing from the Ann Arbor delegation on that project. So, good to know. And again, there's just in this point in the process where, there's a lot of moving parts. And so, no commitments being shared, but, good that we were receiving that feedback from the chair.
I think there's interest from Democratic leadership in the House side in the project, but whether that translates into a line item and what size that line item is kind of up in the air. Okay. So, and that's even speaking with our members, they're like, yeah, we told them we're hearing some mumbles here and there, but nobody's really confirming anything with the membership at this point either.
Okay.
So,
all right. No other questions? All right, then any information on our upcoming business for our next meeting?
I hope at some point to be discussing things with you related to policy and less about money. But we have to work through that process.
I mean, we have some substantial policy stuff that's moving up in months.
We do,
yeah.
And it's worth, and you know, it's tempting on the one hand to think, well, these things are moving because they're democratic priorities, but I will also tell you with substantial knowledge of discussions that are going on and the work that Andrea is doing and the work that our delegation is doing on our behalf, that these things are being moved forward in the time they are and in the way they are, in no small part because of influence that the city is having in Lansing. And so I'm very pleased with how things are going.
Great. Awesome. All right, and if nobody else has anything to share, then we'll move on to public comments. So if anybody who's on the line has public comment and wants to raise their hand, if you're dialing in, I believe it's *9. *9. And this would also be a time if our colleague, Councilmember Iyer, who I see is on the line, would like to say anything or add anything, we can open it up to her as well. Not seeing anyone, then we will close public comment and move to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Watson, Harrison, all those in favor? Harrison?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.